All right, Proffitt Podcast listeners, we have a special guest on the show today. So welcome to the show, Amy. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Krystal, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is so much fun. So I always like to tell people how I get connected with the amazing guests that we have on the show. So we have to give Amanda a shout out because
Absolutely.
Amanda McKinney, who's been on the show before, she connected us via email. She was like, I know both of you ladies and you need to know each other. So here's a connection. And so that's how we got Amy on the show. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and your journey? We were chatting right before we started recording. I said, what's so fun about this podcast is people can come on and really just indulge in their story and talk about the ups and the downs and all the other pieces that their audience may not care about too much, but it's something that maybe you've shared with other people that are just very close to you, but we love to hear all those stories. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, the name of it, and how you came up with the idea.
So, hi, I'm Amy, co-host of the Sports Curious podcast. And the podcast came about, we have a company called Last Night's Game, and we create confidence through sports conversation. Essentially, the podcast and our weekly newsletter is geared to give people who really don't care that much about sports an opportunity to chat about sports. We highlight sort of the pop culture side of sports that makes it very conversational. We always say, like, you don't have to be an ESPN sideline reporter. You can communicate and create conversation and then about starting with sports and then take it to whatever direction you want. And so the podcast itself, we were doing a newsletter that went out 3 times a week. And the podcast itself started because I had a girlfriend who said to me, hey, my commute to work is really short. The mornings are too rushed. I don't have time to read. Would you ever consider doing it in a podcast? I'd love to listen to it. And then I had someone else say the same thing and someone else. I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. So I will be very honest with you. It took me about 8 months to figure out how to put it together. Like, I'm one of those people who just gets paralyzed by the fact of, how do I put this? What kind of system gets it out to Apple and out to Spotify? Like, how does that work? And so I sort of dove into this downward spiral for a long time. I wish I had you at that point, because it would have made my life a lot easier. And I got to the point where it was a couple months before my son was going to be born. I'm like, I have to get my life together. I need to do this podcast, because if I don't do it now, and I'm not going to do it with a newborn. And so I ended up hiring the intern from the co-working space that I worked out of, and said, I will pay you your $15 an hour, I think is what she made at that point, and buy you lunch. Could you spend 2 hours with me and walk me through how you do the podcast for the work co-working space? And she did. And I was like, oh, that's it? Oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah. And so it was just such a simple, I just need someone to hold my hand through it. And so that's how the podcast was born. And it has modified and shifted as we've gone along, and it's evolved. We've been at it for about 5.5, probably about 6 years now. And so it's been a lot of fun, and it's been interesting, right? I think you would say the same thing about podcasting. It's so interesting what's out there. I love listening to podcasts myself. And so I'm a total podcast nerd myself. And so it's really fun to observe and see how people do this. It's great. And do you really, edit a lot? Do you not edit a lot? How does that all work? Do you put music into it? All the things. And so it's really been fun to kind of create that. And I mean, when you start, it's usually small. So it's like, why not give it a shot, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love everything that you just said about really the journey. And there's so many different ways that you could go with it. And what we like to say around here is, like, there's no rules in podcasts. If there's somebody that tells you have to do it this way, that, like, run. Right. We don't believe in that, because your life changes, things evolve. Like, maybe you went from a solo only podcast and now you just want to do interviews, and then you want to have a co-host, and then you don't want to have a co-host, and then you want to go 4 times a week down to just once a month. Like, it is a total evolution of how you want to create content. But I love that you do have a co-host. So tell me about that process. Is that something that you had, like, from the beginning of, is that just in your business? Is that in all of your content? How does that work?
Well, it's funny. So originally when we were started, we were once a week, I believe on a Wednesday, we would come out with a 5-minute podcast, and it would be sort of a 5 things to know about whatever that topic was this week. And it was just me. And I was sort of reading through I had my bullet points, would read through our content, and that would be that. And it came down to, I was with some friends at kind of a mastermind group that we have, our little brain trust. And they said, what I really love about last night's game is my co-founder is my brother. And they're like, I love your banter together. Like when the two of you are on stuff together, it's really fun to see that back and forth. And so like, why don't you put him in your podcast? And also maybe if you did it more times a week, you might get some more traction. I read all these stories and algorithms and this and that. And I was like, okay. So what we ended up doing was we realized our email list wasn't growing. And when it was growing, it really wasn't our target market. It was a lot of our parents' friends who I love to death and that they all subscribe and they all love it. And it's fantastic. But we thought, okay, how do we make this what we want for our market? And so we ended up getting rid of our Monday and Friday email newsletters and making them into short podcasts. So they're about 2 to 3 minute podcasts on a Monday, on a Friday. So it gives you what you need to talk about to go into your week, what you need for your weekend. And then we do a longer form on Wednesdays. It's about 20, 22 minutes with Scott and I. And so the Monday and Friday are just me. And then that Wednesday is the two of us having a longer in-depth conversation. I know quite a bit about sports, but he is like the sports guru. You could ask him just about anything and he would pull that out. So it's really fun to have this conversation. We did one NFL play calling, and it was all about how they call plays and all the idiosyncrasies. And it was fantastic. And I was the audience going, wait, what does that happen? How does that happen? And it's just so fun to get to play that part of, I don't have to be the expert. I can ask all these questions, which I would normally do if it was the two of us together anyways. So our audience gets to be a part of that.
Oh, how fun. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about doing a podcast with my brother. I've actually played around with the idea for many years. And what always stops me is like, I would kill him. Like when it comes back to, I'm like, so does that ever have like the sibling like rivalry like pop up, or you're just like, oh my gosh, like we were supposed to meet, 20 minutes ago and you're late. And like, do you all have that dynamic of like somebody's super organized and together and the other one's like, yeah, it's okay. Like chill out. We'll figure it out. Do y'all have those dynamics?
Well, it's really funny. So we've worked together now for 7.5 years. So we've sort of figured out that who fits in what lane. Mm-hmm. And so that I think has been helpful. We're both pretty understanding. And one of the biggest challenges we have though, is we have very much the same values, right? So when it comes to, what's a good idea? What's this? What's that? Yes, we're two different people who live in two different places in the world, all those things, but we have very similar thought process. So when it comes to getting creative for topics and things like that, that becomes challenging because we think very similarly in so many ways. And so that has been very interesting. And so we usually have interns and it's really great. I really encourage them to speak up because that's that whole outside perspective. And so we've gone back and forth, and I'm sure there's probably times where he's like, oh my gosh, my sister is a pain in the butt. And I'm sure that I've thought that too. But I think we've really figured out our lanes, which I think has been really good. Once we figured out our lanes that we're in and we figured out how to work together. And we know that, I know where he's best in the morning. I'm best in the morning. Like when we do evening podcasts, it's challenging for both of us. We're both a little tired. Our brains aren't quite firing. And so we figured out how to make each other successful. And so it's a learning process, but it's definitely become a lot easier.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because, you talk about the two of you played different, but similar roles, right? Like you're both kind of each other's audiences, or maybe one of you is the subject matter expert for something and the other one is just there to learn. Mm-hmm. So how has that really evolved for you? And is that something that you've always had in mind for your audience? Like, tell me specifically, like who is your audience? Is it someone that's kind of curious about sports? Is it someone that's a fanatic and they are just like, they just want to agree with you? You have those people that are like, yes, that's correct. Like, we love this. Like, they're just your biggest cheerleaders. Like, who is your ideal audience for your podcast?
Well, it's really interesting. So our ideal audience, or our audience for our podcast, tends to be women. But we do have a small portion of that, which are men who don't follow sports, but need that sports conversation. As we all know, that's sort of a main conversation point for men. So I actually had one guy who said, hey, I listen every time. I make sure I listen every time before I go to the barbershop because I want to be prepared because that's all anybody talks about in there. And so it's really interesting to see how that has evolved. And when we really started last night's game back quite a few years ago, we weren't quite as fine-tuned. We didn't quite have that audience nailed down. And it really took us making our sort of target markets and making personas for our market that really allows us to say, and we've named them after our friends. And I'll say, does Lisa really care about this? And my brother will be like, and Scott will be like, no, Lisa doesn't care. I'm like, no, Lisa doesn't care about that. And so it's really fun to how we've done that. And it's also fun because Scott loves to be behind the scenes. He is not in front of the camera person. And so when we had this conversation at lunch over with my brain trust, and they said, well, you think you can get him to be on camera? And I'm like, well, you know what? We're sure as heck going to try. So let's just get him comfortable. And so it is funny to watch him evolve. I think that's like something that's really cool for me to see is in his day job, he doesn't get to do a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And so it's fun to see this piece of him come out, and he's really funny. And so I actually, when I edit the podcast, I can tell what my laugh looks like because every episode there's at least 2 or 3 times where it's just my cackle laughing because he's so entertaining. And so it's been really fun to piece that all together. But yeah, it's an evolution. And then there's days where he's the expert, and there's days where I teach him things. When we talked about fashionable athletes, he was like, what's a Birkin bag? What's this? What's that? I'm like, I've got you. You normally teach me things. I've got you here. So it's been fun.
That's funny. Yeah. Pull up a seat. Like you're just going to be taking all the information in today. That's exactly that. I love that so much. Well, I want to go back to the beginning because one thing that the audience loves to hear on the podcast is really those origin stories of when you first got started, because I think that it can feel so isolating when you're just getting started. I mean, your story earlier was a great example of like, oh my God, this feels so overwhelming. And then you had someone show you how to podcast. You're like, wait, that's it. I think that that's really what it feels like before you start recording yourself. So do you have any kind of cautionary tales or lessons learned for whenever you first sat down with a microphone for the very first time? Like what happened? What did that look like for you?
Well, it's really funny. So I think one of the things that you hear when you start a podcast is you've got to be in this padded room, and some people I know record in their shower and they had all these like scenarios, right? So I used to record in my closet, and I didn't do video because I was terrified of what video would look like because I was in my closet on the floor, speaking into my clothing. And so it's funny how that's evolved. And I'm sure obviously technology has evolved too. You have things like Riverside that really do a great job of evening out your audio. But how much you really get to explore and let your personality come through, where I think before it was very much, I don't know if I thought I was NPR. I'm not sure what I had going on. But I think that there's this huge piece of personality in it. And for us, we aren't perfect. And I think that's a huge, soapbox for me as a woman leader is we're not perfect. We can't do it all. I can't make my child a 5-course meal and do all the things that I'm doing. It just doesn't work that way. And so sometimes he wrote in his Mother's Day thing the other day that his favorite thing that I make is cereal. So I sort of just, to me, that's our podcast. It's personable. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to, someone might sneeze. Granted, I'm going to try to edit all that out, but those things happen. And so I think that there is this opportunity for me, and that's how I run the podcast. It's not perfectly edited. Everything is not perfect. And so for me, that is really critical. And that's something I had to own because I had people say, oh, well, it's not that it's raw, but like they really prefer things very, very edited. And that's how they would run their podcast. And like, that's great. That's your podcast. That's not mine. We pride ourselves on being available and ready with information as it needs to be. And we're firing, right? When you're in sports, you can't pre-record.
Yeah.
You're doing things really up to the minute that it happens. And so there are some days where it's like 4 a.m. and I'm pulling things together for a Monday. And so that's just the way it works. And so it's fun to piece it together. It's fun, the challenge. I mean, the beauty of what we do too is it can be done anywhere. I throw this microphone in my suitcase and it goes all over the world with me. And you record when you can record and you make it happen. And like you said, it's not necessarily a padded room. It might be a hotel room underneath a blanket. I've done that. Like I've done all the things. So,
which I think is really, a fun perspective when you've been doing it for so long, because you do find yourself in these unique situations where, I've recorded in my car waiting for my son to finish his orthodontist appointment. Cause I was like, I have no other pockets of time today. This is the only one. Here we go. And I think it's so much more fun. And especially as a listener of a lot of podcasts that also do that, I think that switch in dynamic of like just the traditional, like beautiful background setup with perfect sound, like to have that jolt of like, y'all, this is raw. Like this is totally different. The audience will actually tell me like, I love there's one specific episode that I was at my parents' house and there were roosters crowing in the background. And I was like, oh, shut up, stupid roosters. You know, I'm like, oh, I was like, okay, the roosters are, yeah. I was like, what are you doing? Like, I thought I got up before everybody. I didn't get up before everybody. And I had more people message me about that saying, I love it when you go to your parents' house and we can hear the roosters. Like, it's just so fun. So have you had your audience like tell you that there's like a specific style or dynamic or a certain thing that you do that they're like, oh man, like that, those are just golden nuggets for them?
Well, I think it goes back to the two of us being on things together. I think everyone really appreciates the brevity of the Monday and Friday, that there's just like, it's a quick in and out. You can listen to it. If you're
Yeah.
on 1.5 times, you're out in 1.5 minutes. So there is that piece to it. But I think it goes back to the raw, unedited sort of, let's keep the laughs in. Let's keep the snort that comes when you're laughing. Like, let's keep all those. And it's really funny when you were talking about your rooster episode. There was a podcast I was a guest on, and it was a really big podcast. And for some reason, our time zones on scheduling were off. And I was at a doctor's appointment, and I get a text that says, making sure you're going to be on in 10 minutes. I know we've had some issues with time zones. And I was like, oh my gosh. No, I'm like on the doctor's office for, I don't know, shot or something. I have no idea. But I was like, I have to go. This is a really big deal. And so I panicked, right? What do? You get in the car, and I drove to the corner of a shopping center where it was kind of quiet. Hopefully I wouldn't have too many people drive by. And I was like, okay, like fix up a face, like attempt to like open the sunroof to get some good lighting. And it was like, that was it actually worked so perfectly into how this podcast worked. And it was about busy working moms. And it was like, I'm in a corner of a shopping center in my car, panicked. Yeah. I'm watching a school out this window and I'm staring at an Olive Garden. Like, it was just, and it fit the mold so well. And I was so panicked because it was a big deal. And I was like, I need this to be perfect. I need to be in my nice settings. And here it was, not perfect. And it worked out just fine.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. So thank you for sharing that story here, because I think that because it can be isolating, you know, if people aren't in a community of podcasters, like they just think that they're the only ones that have these situations or these weird, quirky things that happen. And I'm like, no, they happen to all of us. And that just means that you're officially a podcaster when something like that happens to you, and you just make it happen and you go on about your business and you just keep showing up and keep showing up.
That's right.
But I want to switch gears a little bit from, you know, talking to kind of that beginner mindset and just getting your show off the ground to now you've been doing this for several years. And one of the main questions I get is about growth and monetization and, you know, how can we reach more people? So have you really found a strategy that's helped you connect with more listeners or had more growth in your show?
It's challenging. And I'll tell you, everyone I talk to, you know, looking at your numbers, right? And you've probably talked about this ad nauseum, but I feel like there's not a great reporting tool. That's one of the biggest challenges I find in podcasts. I also find that you really never know what everybody else is doing. It's sort of like talking about salaries, right? Everyone's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, because you're like, well, that person says they have 10,000 downloads an episode, and that one is, you know, 100,000. Like, where do I fit? This looks weird. These numbers don't seem right. I get all these notes from people who are listening. And so I do find that that is really challenging from the reporting standpoint, is what that looks like. I have found the most success in truly making the relationships. I haven't had a lot of success ongoing on the different platforms for advertising, that kind of stuff. And also for me, it's, I kind of want to, it's a control thing maybe, but I kind of want to control what's on my podcast. I think that's, to me, important. I want to make sure that it fits with our mission as a business. And, you know, that's, for us, it's very much, we really try to keep our head high when it comes to sports. We really do try to step away from some of the bad news stories, people that paint people in a bad light. That's not what we really want to do. And so we really do try to stick to that positivity. And so, you know, we really do try to keep that brand. And so for me, not using one of those platforms, we tried, didn't really have great success.
Yeah.
And so I found that the partnerships with friends with businesses, whatever that might look like, those tend to be the best. I've done a couple of platforms to be a podcast guest. That's helped a lot to grow things as well. So I think it's just that organic to be, it's not fast, it's not easy, but it seems to be where you get people and they stay
Yes.
versus a contest or something, type of thing where they get there, but then they leave. And so you really want, to me, it's so important to do the right thing that might take longer and build that audience over a longer course of time because they stay and they love you and they stick with you as a person, as a podcast versus a flash in the pan, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. I started, and what year did you officially launch your podcast and get it out into the world? Okay. So we're like same boat. And it was around that time when everybody was still so focused on like getting in the Apple charts, like whatever you have to do to get on the Apple charts, because then your show will be featured. And like that was the only goal for every podcast was like just get new and noteworthy and your show will absolutely take off. And then the more I got connected to industry experts and they were like, well, my show was in new and noteworthy. And I had this huge spike. And then I crashed and burned. And so it's exactly what you're talking about, that mentality of having this flood of people come in. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was, or this is a different host, like all the reasons why people leave. And, one of the things that I always think about is like, well, how can you get people to stay? And this is a question, that I would pose to you and really anybody listening to this is, if you were to get 1 million new subscribers tomorrow, is your content ready for that kind of influx? Like, do you have that foundation laid? So how long do you say like that took for you to kind of figure out? Because there's a lot of people listening that maybe have just launched and they're still on shaky ground. They're like, the foundation isn't like, don't step over there. Like there's boards and there's nails still poking out. I'm still trying to figure this out. How long until you actually felt confident in what you were creating was working?
So I actually want to go back. I'll answer that in a second, but it's really interesting because you lived the life that we did where things were going great and then COVID hit and people stopped commuting. And all of a sudden you looked at your numbers and went, oh my gosh, what happened?
Yeah.
And how to recover those because the commute still is not the same. And so we still feel the effects of that lack of commute. And it's so interesting on how that shifted. I mean, it was one of those like 1 week it was great. 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, then you looked at numbers and went, what happened? And it's really fascinating. And I find like, you have to stay the course. And I think it's easy to get frustrated. Maybe you put out an episode that doesn't get a lot of traction and you're like, okay, well, noted. It could be multiple things, right? It could be the timing of your topic isn't great. It could be, like summer is really challenging, right? Right around Christmas, people aren't listening. And so those kinds of areas are more challenging. And so it's like, it could be the topic. It could be the timing of the topic. There could be a lot of things. And I think really just knowing sort of your mission and your North Star and sticking to that. And if anybody tells you their podcast doesn't have nails and boards sticking out of it, I don't care if you have 1 million followers and 1 million downloads per episode. They also too are sort of piecing stuff together with duct tape. So let's not pretend that we're not all going, okay, crap. It's June. We don't have Olympics yet. We're just in baseball. What are we going to talk about this week? And sometimes it comes down to the day of going, you know what, let's pull this one out. Let's make this one happen. And so I think anyone who tells you otherwise is probably kind of full of it because I do think we all struggle in our own ways. I do think we all struggle. And I do think there's going to be times where you're frustrated. There's times where you feel defeated. And if you aren't putting yourself out there, right? I do think that part of that challenge and part of the exciting part about a podcast is you really do get that feedback quite quickly. And so if you try something and it doesn't work, move on. It's 1 episode, 2 episodes, move on. And if you need to make a shift, as you sort of said in the beginning, like if you need to make a shift, make a shift. If you feel that you're only going to be sustainable if you go to once a month, or you're only going to be, I have a friend who takes a summer break and she just needs that. And that is so important for her. And it doesn't kill her, right? Her podcast is still there. It still has plenty of episodes. She's on her 4th season. And so that's what she needs to be sustainable. And if that's what you need to be sustainable, do it. I think
Oh,
that's my perspective.
oh, it's such great advice because I mean, we've been in this industry long enough to see people come and
Mhm.
unfortunately people go. And so I'm so curious, like, have you ever been close to burnout? And do you have any advice for someone maybe that's what they're struggling with right now? They haven't posted in a while and they're like, I don't know if I can come back to it.
Oh, burnout, I think is absolutely. I mean, when you're putting yourself out there and you're having to create content and trying to think like other people, that there is a burnout factor. And I think that applies to any role, any position. But I would say that, my biggest thing and the biggest thing that Scott and I do with last night's game is consistency is key.
Mhm.
It's not always going to
Yeah.
be perfect, but consistency is key. I mean, that was one big thing for us during COVID. There were no live sports happening. And so we were really sort of scraping to put together a 3 times a week. At that point, it was 3 times a week newsletter, right? With really interesting things. And so did it get frustrating? Sure. But it was sort of one of those like, the world's not in a good place. So let's just do our best to find the positive stories and make this the best we can. And so I would say that to your podcast. If you're burnout, take a break, take a walk around the block, whatever you need, but also listen to other podcasts for inspiration. I think that
Mhm.
is, I'm a big Mel Robbins fan, and I'm constantly in awe on how much content she creates. But I also know she has a team, right? So just give yourself a little credit. We can't compare ourselves all the time to, it's like startups that I work with. You can't compare yourself to Mark Zuckerberg because that's a whole different animal. There are very
Mhm.
few Mark Zuckerbergs. There are a lot of people doing amazing things that are not Mark Zuckerberg. And so it's one of those like, take inspiration from those people, but don't necessarily hold yourself to that standard. Like give yourself a little bit of a break. It's okay. And it's okay to have an episode that's, like I said, maybe not great. And what I like to do too sometimes is when you're burnout, use your social media, use your podcast as an opportunity to say, what do you want to hear? What do
Mhm.
you want to talk about? What's on your mind? And it could be, you do a podcast about helping people start their podcast, and someone might reply to you about, I need more recipes for dinner. And you're like, okay, well, maybe I can twist that to, I need to find someone who has a cooking podcast, whatever that might be. And so it's like, take that information in and don't be afraid to speak, break that third wall and speak directly to your audience because that is such a huge piece of who you are because they love you as the podcast host. So give that opportunity for them to also communicate with you. And sometimes that does help the burnout. And sometimes it's just more frustrating. And it is, I hate to say, but it is what it is. It is part of what we
Yeah.
do. And we all get burnt out, even if it's podcasting or parenting or, going to work at a bank every day. We have those times and just know that that's part of the evolution of you as a human.
Yeah. And I'll just add like a quick anecdote on that. I thought it was about a year ago that I was approaching burnout and I thought it was from my content. But then, and I love that you mentioned Mel Robbins, it was because I was listening to too much of my own industry. Like I was just constantly this influx, like it was just a steady stream of information about like how to grow your online business and how to do this and be,
Mhm.
incredible. And it was all like business, like self-improvement, all that. And then I was like, where's the comedy stuff that I started with?
Yes.
And so I just scrapped all of that. And then I just went like so hard on all of my favorite podcasts that I listened to before I ever started podcasting. And I
Mhm.
really haven't gone back to the version I was before because I think that that's what it was. It wasn't burnout from my own content. I thought that's what it was. It was actually burnout from the industry. And I'm
Mhm.
so curious because especially with sports, like I actually just want to know more about your podcast when it comes to sports, because I'm thinking like, well, do y'all cover any and all sports? Like, is it pickleball too, and cricket, and like all the ones that may not get as much airtime here in the US, but it's still things that can kind of fill those gaps, like you were saying, like
Mhm.
in between seasons. Like, how does that work for you? And I don't know anything else to add to that.
Yeah, it's actually really good. And I want to say too, on your part where like listening to too much, I was feeling that way on social, right? I was feeling
Yes.
like I'm not doing enough. I'm watching these coaches, I'm watching this and that. And I finally stopped following those people. I unfollowed them and said, this isn't making me happy. I'm not
Yep.
learning anything from these. Like I'm learning things from these people, but I'm actually feeling worse about myself. So I'm just going to stop. And it was just, I think like you, I was like, I'm just going to stop. I'm not feeding my soul, and I'm grumpy, and I feel like I'm unsuccessful.
Yes.
And Scott would probably tell you if he was on here, is like, oh yeah, I see when she does too much of that, because she comes in raging with new ideas and we got to fix this and do this. And why are we spending money on this? But going back to the sports question, it was really important for us to research and see what was out there. And there are so many podcasts that are just basketball based or whatever that might be. And we really strive to be that one-off podcast, and the name of the podcast is Sports Curious, and that's truly what we're aiming for. And we've partnered with other podcasts who do sports, and sometimes because they're extra sporty, like, let's promote your episode about the NBA playoffs. We're not diving as deep as you are, because so if someone wants to know more, you're the right person for that. And so for us, it's having that mission of really creating that confidence in conversation through sports. End of story. And so we have people who, when lacrosse really started to pick up about 5-6 years ago, I had a lot of people reach out and say, I don't know anything about lacrosse, but my child's playing it. Can you help me? And so we did episodes on lacrosse. I have a dear friend who lives in Australia, and we've done episodes on cricket. And we did a 2-part series on pickleball, because we love pickleball so much. And it's finding those fun, quirky things about pickleball. And my brother plays pickleball. And so it was great for me to say, like, what the heck is this? I don't understand. So we fill the void. Like, we'll talk about the Olympics, but we'll also talk about Oscar-nominated sports movies and things like that. So there's an opportunity for something for everyone is kind of how I look at it. And when there's times it makes sense to engage and inform, the start of an NFL season or start of the college football season, those are big opportunities for us. But at Super Bowl, especially Kentucky Derby. But it's also a great opportunity in the off time to give people little nuggets of something to talk about and really just have that notable, funny thing. And I'm like you, I think the humor that comes with some of these podcasts, and it's just so peaceful, right? Like when you come down, it's like being with your friends and chatting and having a good time. And so, don't let yourself get too down if you do get to a spot where you're feeling a bit burnt out. Like you said, shift what's going on around you. What does that look like? Is it reorganize your office? Is it change what you listen to? Whatever that might be, change what you eat for breakfast. But it's also, what is the content you're consuming around you that might inspire you versus inform you, if that makes sense. And sometimes that inspiration, I'm a big Smartless podcast fan too. So it's like, what makes me laugh? Because at the end of the day, life is too serious, and listening to NPR back up with Smartless is probably a great way to affect the day.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because, if you are listening to this podcast and you've never listened to Smartless, you don't even have to go listen to a full episode. Just go listen to their intro. And I promise you will feel so much more organized in everything that you're doing with your podcast. Cause that's really like, I leave that podcast motivated because I'm like, oh yeah, they have no idea. Like they genuinely still don't know what they're doing. They've been doing this for 4 years and they're just showing up and having fun. That's what it's about for them. And I'm like, it's incredible. And it's so inspiring.
Yeah. I was actually telling someone the other day, for those if you're not familiar with it, it's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. And they literally have a surprise guest that comes on every time. And it was Mark Cuban was the one I really enjoyed, because two of them, one of them really didn't know who Mark Cuban was. And they really had no idea. And Mark Cuban's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, or was. And he made all his money through tech. But it was just funny because they're like, well, how did you make your money? And they're asking all these questions that, you and I would show up being informed with our whole page of notes, right? And, which I just love, because those are questions that people are probably thinking who are listening. If they have them, that your listeners have them too. And so it was so fun to listen to that. And like you said, realize that they're not coming in 100% prepared either.
No.
And so it really is a good laugh, at least from my perspective. Yeah.
100%. I love that show. It makes me so happy. I actually need to catch up on this week's latest episode. Like I'm excited. And this is one thing, that I love to talk about, the perspective of creating content and being a podcaster, but also consuming it, because it really helps to get in that mind frame, because then you can imagine what your audience is doing, like that anticipation that's building. So, you've mentioned the Olympics a few times. Are there any other like really big things that you are looking ahead for the rest of the year that you like personally, you're so excited to chat about, or you just get really giddy when, seasonally, because I mean, what you're doing is seasonal, which is
Mhm.
so fun. Cause I mean, you get to change it up from time to time. But is there anything that you're just like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for that to come this year?
One of the funniest ones we do is the hot dog eating contest for 4th of July.
Okay.
And it always does really well because it is just like there is nothing more American than a hot dog eating contest.
100%.
And it's just has so many weird, quirky things about it. And that's where we live. Like we live in the weird and quirky because I want you to remember something like a Roman incident is what they call people throwing up from their hot dogs. And so it's like those kinds of things I want you to think about because they're funny. And
Yeah.
so, 4th of July is always great for us. Obviously, the Olympics will be really big this year. And, then we roll into football season. And football season is a huge opportunity for us to pick up new people. I mean, we really have this huge growth and influx of fans with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
this huge opportunity we look at it as an opportunity to inform and teach, but also give those nuggets to entertain, right? I find that the best thing about sports is it's a great way to start a conversation, but you can go into a multitude of topics, food, travel, I don't know. Let's see what else. Food travel seems to be the easiest ones to pull out of there. And so it's so much fun to fashion, pop culture. It's so fun to be able to give people those nuggets to get started. And then it can turn into, okay, great. You like the Cubs. Where do you like to go in Chicago? And all these different things, because I am to the sort of the audience, because while I love sports, I couldn't tell you who played in the 1972 World Series.
Right.
And so sometimes I'm grasping for straws too, to piece it all together. And so it's sort of a product of that podcast and of the information that we relay as well.
Well, this may be a sacrilegious question to ask then, but do you have a favorite sport? What is your favorite sport to watch?
It's really interesting. So my career started in Major League Baseball. And so I spent 8 years in baseball, and I love baseball. Don't get me wrong, but it's so fun that I live in a football household.
Okay.
And so we do watch a lot of football. We've really enjoyed being from Las Vegas. I've really enjoyed the Vegas Golden Knights. So I've enjoyed picking up hockey as a sport that I never watched as a kid. So it's fun to see. And I've really, really enjoyed watching the WNBA, watching women's sports evolve. My son is 5, and we watched so much women's March Madness basketball.
Mhm. Yeah.
In fact, my brother went to the Final Four for women's basketball, and my son has been walking around in his Final Four t-shirt that he bought him, and he's just like, "This is my Caitlin Clark t-shirt."
Oh, I love it.
And so it's really fun to see. Like I really like watching the evolution of all of these things. And I remember when SportsCenter first featured a WNBA game as the first story of SportsCenter. And I called my brother. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I just watched a WNBA highlight as the first thing on ESPN on SportsCenter." And so it's been fun to watch that. And so I would say football is a mainstay in our house, but it is fun to start adding in those other layers of, we really enjoy watching WNBA and hockey and some of these other layers of all kinds of random sports, dog surfing, which comes out, sometimes in the summer. And so, we sort of pick up all the idiosyncrasies and all the oddities that we can find.
Oh my gosh. Well, everyone's going to have to go check out Sports Curious, because I am so curious about this hot dog eating contest now. Like, I want the scoop. I want the full. I don't know if I could watch the whole thing, because I have tried to watch them before, and I'm like, I don't think I could do it. But I could listen to it as long as there's no like audible clips from the thing. Like, we're good.
No, you're safe. Well, and it's
so
fun.
much
It's fun barbecue banter for 4th of July, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Like, I mean, and I love the idea of it being, at the end of the day, even if it's just talking points for a conversation you're going to have with your friends or your loved ones, like being able, I don't know if you watch Friends, but I love the episode where Joey gets like the Z and it was the V and the encyclopedia set. That was the only one that he could afford. And then all of a sudden he knew all of these things about volcano and all these things. And I feel like that's how this could be. Like, you could just show up and you know all the details about the hot dog eating contest or rugby or lacrosse or whatever it is. That is so much fun. So everyone has to go check out Sports Curious, especially with the Olympics coming up. I know
so many good things.
Fun.
And we like to do things like the Olympics. I think we already have queued up. Like, where do people store their medals? What do Olympians do in their day job? So we've kind of queued up some of those ideas, and we've started brainstorming about that, because yes, you'll want to learn about the Olympics, but the Olympics are a month long. So let's talk
Yeah.
about other things that you can share that content.
Oh, that's going to be so much fun. Well, Amy, this has been incredible. Like, I feel like I've learned so much already, and I haven't even listened to all that you have to offer on your podcast. So I'm absolutely going to start listening on a regular basis. But I have 3 rapid fire questions to wrap up this interview today. So are you up for those?
Of course.
Okay. All right. The first one is, what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster or content creator?
Just do it. Just do it. If you start with a logo that's kind of pieced together from Fiverr, whatever that is, just get started and you can refine as you go along and you build your audience.
That's awesome. And it was a great Nike reference, just do it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. My next one's a 2-part question. So, what is a dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest you would love to interview?
Oh man, that's a good one. I would say, I think just because we talked about it, and I would just love the banter. Smartless is definitely high on that list. I love a good banter. Working in a male-dominated industry for most of my career, it's fun to just jump in there and be like that and have good jokes. And guest, oh my gosh, it would probably be a tie between. I think Gwyneth Paltrow would be interesting because I've loved how she's taken her acting career and turned it into Goop and this whole game changer of what Goop is. And I would probably say growing up, I wanted to be Katie Couric. And so I wanted to be on the Today Show. Obviously I am not, last time I checked. And so I would love to have her on, or maybe Savannah Guthrie, because I think what they do is so interesting and how you show up. I mean, talk about burnout, right? You're covering an election and then you're showing up the next morning at 3 a.m. and you're having to be perky and all the things. And so I think it'd be a very interesting perspective to talk about them as an individual and what their day-to-day and their life looks like versus just the sort of fame of being that person we see in the morning.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, those are awesome. Okay. And my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No. I would like to pretend I am. I think that life has humbled me enough at this stage that this morning everyone's getting ready for school and my husband tracks water all the way in the house. And I'm like, could you have just wiped your shoes off? But like at the end of the day, you think that the spot on the floor is really going to destroy my life. Like it's just one of those, like, you have to roll with life, what life's given you. I think having kids definitely humbles you to know that you can't be perfect and your schedule is not your own and all of those things. But I think perfect is really a facade. What we present, it's painful to present that you're perfect because it's too hard. There's enough going on in life and there's enough stress in life that be who you are, be genuine, be honest, and be authentic. And people are going to love you who you are. They're not going to love you because you're perfect.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I have a random question that just popped into my head because you mentioned cereal earlier. I'm like, maybe we'll have to add this to our rapid fire questions. But if your podcast was a cereal, what kind of cereal would it be?
Oh, I like this. Oh gosh. Maybe it's a toss up. We have this one in our house. It's like sunshine, sunrise, something or other. It could be that, right? It's got a little bit of everything in it, like a Kix type thing and a cornflake type thing. It could be something like that. Or maybe, oh gosh, I feel like it could be like Lucky Charms.
Oh,
We've got these like little nuggets of the good stuff that you're really floating for. There's a bunch of noise, a bunch of like things that don't taste like marshmallows. But there's these little nuggets that you're going to find in your Lucky Charms that are just those gems that you want to take with you.
Oh, that's so good. We're adding that. So
I think it's a great one.
We'll say this is like, we're going to dedicate this to Amy. She's officially added another question to our rapid fire questions. Like thank your son today for the cereal. Like,
all you have to tell your guys, walk down the cereal aisle before you record with me. I'm not going to tell you why, but just stroll down the cereal aisle first. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. have something in there and people are going to be like, what? I don't eat cereal. Like I just eat this. And I'm going to be like, oh, come on guys. Like, it's just fun. It's just fun.
Just pull something out. Cheerios, whatever.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Well, this has been so fun, Amy. Let us know where everybody can connect with you and learn more about, last night's game and all the other fun things that you're doing.
Thank you. Lastnightsgame.com is our website. We are the Sports Curious Podcast. We are on all major platforms. And of course, we are on social media at Last Night's Game.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.